Hello, I want to welcome you back to How to Play the Game of College, the podcast. The past few weeks, we have been dropping some really great interviews, and the train just continues. And so tonight, super excited. And before we get started, make sure that you like, share, and we want to read those comments. I know we got Dr. George on here today. He's going to be looking for those comments and replying to them all. So make sure y'all comment. We want to really see those additional questions. And so we're going to get started with the podcast tonight with Dr. George. Dr. George is the CEO, president of TECA. And I'm going to let him actually tell you what TECA stands for and just his journey to Dr. George. So many times we see folks kind of how they are now. We see Dr. Boys, we see Dr. George, and not really knowing their journey until how they really got to their point. So first, I want to welcome you to the podcast today, Dr. George.
Thanks, Dr. Boyd. Appreciate you so much for the opportunity to share.
Yes. And if you can, just give us a little bit about your background, your educational background, and again, how you got to who you are today.
Would love to. So I think it's also interconnected with the ideal of going to college too as well. I grew up in K-12 and navigated the K-12 experience as a gifted and talented student. So I spent a lot of my time as the only Black boy in many of my classes. College was not a conversation that we had in my household. My mom was a teen mother, had her first child at 16, had a third child, which was me by the time she turned 20. Eventually, she ended up going to college later in life, but I had navigated all the way my K-12 experience without really hearing the words like, you should go to college, and just the idea of what college would actually mean. She actually went to college a little bit by the time I actually started college. So we were kind of on the journey around the same time. All that to say, fast forward, I got to college, graduated, ended up getting into the education space after working in sales. I ended up working in higher ed in an advisor enrollment position for a couple of years, and then realized that I needed to get closer to the challenges that I was seeing with the students that I was supporting. I was supporting first generation college adult learners. And so these were folks who had graduated from high school. They were coming to college later in life, but still were at 27, 28, 29, even 30, the first person in their family to go to college. So I ended up becoming a high school teacher. I taught in the school district that I grew up in, but I taught in a school where I was the only Black male for the almost 6 years that I was there. That led me to the work I lead now. I launched the Tennessee Educators of Color Alliance during my last year teaching because I was in this fellowship, and the fellowship opened my eyes to issues that were going on in education. The ones that I care about the most was teacher diversity, but it also made me aware of like the policy implications that were associated with that. So the premise of the organization, the work that I lead now, is how do we support and retain educators of color in the state of Tennessee so they can stay in the profession, which ultimately allows us to increase the representation. So we're adding and recruiting people to the profession that are diverse educators, and we're retaining them. The numbers will increase. But also, how do we leverage the unique leadership skills, experiences, and voices to lean in on the policy space? So if you haven't been aware, Tennessee and many states in the South have been bombarded with legislation and policies over the last couple of years that are determining how teachers can teach and how students can learn. And part of my work in the organization is to sustain educators of color to stay in the profession so they can also make those shifts and changes to make it more equitable, not only for the educator serving, but for the student that get the opportunity to learn.
That's so great to hear. And you all are doing TECA, doing some really great work. And like you said, you know, teachers are so important. Dr. George, I actually started my book off, How to Play the Game of College, honoring my teacher, one of my teachers, Miss Hardaway, who was my Algebra 2 teacher at Overton High School in Memphis, who really pushed me, I like to say, push me to the college steps, right? Similar to you, first generation college student, didn't really know a whole lot. And so teachers play such a critical role. I know you taught for many years too, and really helping students get from secondary to post-secondary and really exploring those various options. As you know, Dr. George, this book is dedicated to students and their parents. And one of the chapters is how to select your major, okay? Mm-hmm. And of course, we're talking about teachers. We live in a world where sometimes, you know, teachers are not seen in a TikTok world, I like to say, or the YouTube, right? It's not the glitz and glamour, right, of a teaching background or field. What can you say for those who might be on the line of deciding with like, hey, I'm going to college, I want to major in teaching. However, sometimes in the world, you know, people sometimes push people away from that. What do you say to those students who might be considering that field?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I actually was just talking about this. Like, I think sometimes we get the wrong educators in front of our aspiring or future teachers. And a lot of times because of and it's not that they may not love the profession, but it's just because of some of the challenges, it has changed their perspective in a way where all they can offer up to someone who may be considering the profession, it's all the negative things about it. I think for someone who's really thinking about entering the profession, I would love them to know that the profession needs you. As you're thinking about making that decision, there's an immediate impact that you make by showing up just immediately. Upon that, the other thing I would say, like, this is a lot of hard work, but it's also social justice work. All of the societal issues that we're dealing with in the world, there's a microcosm of that lives in education. So the discrimination, some of the racial inequity, some of the inequitable challenges that we're dealing with around mental health, and we see show up in the world. There are folks that are navigating that in the K-12 space. It takes a special person who really cares about children and cares about the future, the democracy, and the fabric of our economic mobility to get in front of kids, because that's what you're preparing them for. You're preparing a generation to go into a world, and they're going to work, and they're going to contribute, they're going to add value. You get the opportunity to be the inception of that and be able to shape that. And so for those of you who have the itch and you're interested and you are even thinking about the profession, I would highly encourage you to dig deeper beyond the surface of what your current teachers may be looking at. I mean, what they're currently facing and how they show up, and ask them the question, like, despite all of those things, why do you still stay in this profession? I promise you, you'll probably get some answers that aren't just located on the surface that you oftentimes get when you say, I want to be a teacher.
Right.
Pay and the children and the discipline and all this. It's so much deeper than that. You're adding so many layers of value, and you oftentimes won't get that response because the wrong question is being asked, or you're talking to the wrong person who's already on the end of being burnt out.
So true, so true. And I like how you said, really ask the questions to the, those professionals that you're trying to like go into, right? And so a lot of times I like to tell students, we only see the magazine covers of careers, right? And every cover, it always looks great, right? But when you open that magazine, you start seeing, some of those teachers, their hair comes down, they sweating. But like you said, at the end of the day, I feel like a career, and I kind of talk about that in the book. If Oprah Winfrey was your stepmom, right? And she gave you all this money, and you don't have to really worry about a job because you're good. But what would you do to really fulfill that passion on a daily basis? And I like how you talk about it. When we talk about teaching as hard, HEART, hard work, which is so key. And that leads us to our next question, Dr. George. Mentorship, right? I know TECA, part of you all's model is mentorship when it comes to retention of teachers of color. Can you talk about maybe with TECA or just through your journey, how mentorship really played a huge role in helping you to navigate the college scene?
Absolutely. So I do both. So one, there's our program we offer is called the Ascension Project. We support teacher candidates of color at different institutions that are trained to be teachers. Part of that work looks like us being in a position to where we provide them access to a current teacher of color who's in the profession. It's one thing to try to teach somebody for the job, and a lot of times what they're getting in their institution doesn't overlay the idea that you may be like me and walk into a space and be the only Black person on the job, or only Black male person on the job. Nothing that I learned in my preparation experience could have prepared me for that particular experience. So we take our teacher candidates and we layer them and pair them with a in-service teacher of color, to be a mentor to them, to help them realize the challenges that exist with being a person of color in the profession, but also how they can combat those challenges with self-advocacy. So there's no better way to learn about these challenges and how to actually navigate them than someone who's on the job, who's actually doing it. I say that also to say that I've done it in my own personal life professionally. I emulate I connect myself with people who are doing things that I want to do.
Yeah.
I let them to learn from them in ways, one, I have better insight to be able to do it well for myself. But two, oftentimes that person has the T-shirt of the bumps and the bruises that they've incurred of navigating the place of success. And in most instances, that level of mentorship, they're willing to share that with you because if they believe in you, they want you to get there quicker and they want you to go further. And so they'll pour into you. I would say that also for our collegiate students. There are people who want to be doctors, lawyers, engineers. Finding access to someone as a professional, and I specifically can say this if I can, Dr. Boyd, for professionals of color, Black and brown professionals in these fields, education is not the only space where we see a dearth of educators of color. Like,
right.
Same thing is true for lawyers and health professionals, folks that are in the engineering field. But if you can find somebody who can, who has had access to that profession, they navigated the collegiate aspects of it, and they're working in the field right now, you'd be surprised how many people would be willing to mentor a young, impressionable person who just asked them, literally just had the courage and the insight and the perspective to ask them for the additional help along the way. Leveraging the social media platforms makes us bring the world so much closer together. So you don't necessarily have to have somebody who grew up around you, because I didn't grow up around me seeing Black and brown teachers. I had Tennessee my whole time. It's that reality for someone who wants to be a doctor, lawyer. They may not have seen and been exposed to someone who looks like them in the profession. So it's a huge opportunity to be able to leverage the resources available to put yourself in a position to ask for the guidance for somebody who more than likely is willing to give it to you.
Yes, and I couldn't agree with you more. And I like how, over the past few weeks, our podcasts, our guests are pretty much saying the same thing. We had Dr. George, Dr. Small, who's at the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, mentioned the hidden agenda, right? And so a lot of times, especially when we talk about students of color, we get them to a college campus. That hidden agenda is sometimes found through a mentor. And so I love how you're saying they're the blueprint of where you're trying to go. They're going to show you the bumps in the roads, but they're not going to be there to tell you not to go over the bump. At the end of the day, it's your decision. But I think it's so key to have somebody before you that you can really sit down, you can talk things through. You can, if you're about to jump off the ledge, in which sometimes in school, that would happen. You have that crazy exam that you failed and you just think it's the end of the world. That mentor would be like, hey, I failed 3 exams and I graduated, and you can too, which is so fun. Yes. One thing we like to do, Dr. George, on this podcast, I like to call this the real segment, right? When we really talk about ourselves, and really, again, as you know, this podcast goes out to high school students mainly, of course, some students first year, and parents, right? So when you look at your life in post-secondary, right? I know you are a student at Austin Peay, right? Shout out to Austin Peay. Can you maybe mention one huge obstacle that you had to overcome? Because as I just stated, a lot of times students get that one, something that just wasn't planned, and they just stop going, right? And they go and say, hey, I'm going to forget about college. I'm going to the workforce, and that's just not an option for me. Do you mind getting personal?
Absolutely.
And really tell us about that obstacle and maybe how you overcame it.
Absolutely. And if I may, can I share 2?
Yeah.
So I graduated from Austin Peay, but I actually started school at the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga.
Okay.
Fun fact about me, I'm in the academic hall of fame at my alma mater in high school. I graduated in the top of my class. I was considered smart, and educational inequity didn't show for me until I got to college. I just naturally assumed that I was always in the dual enrollment, the AP classes. I was in all the clubs. I had all the distinctions, National Honor Society, Beta, you name it. I probably was doing it. I just thought I was going to show up to college and it was going to be a continuation of high school. What I didn't realize was there's no vertical alignment between your university and the high school that you went to. You got people coming from all over. And some people's high schools have prepared them to literally walk into college and pick up where they left off at. When I got to college, I didn't read Gilgamesh. I didn't know anything about some of these things. And it was such a huge gap. There were things that I was supposed to have learned that prepared me for pre-cal that I didn't learn. And this goes to the first bit of advice that I would get. I was too prideful to seek the help that I needed. There were resources, there was tutoring available, there was the right MLA instead of APA when I got in college. And that was a huge shift for me. But I was so prideful because I was so used to being the smart guy that I didn't know how to ask. And I sat there and I followed in my shame. I didn't want to go to the office hours. I didn't want to do the additional work that was necessary for me to be successful. I had a full ride scholarship at UT Chattanooga. I ended up losing that scholarship because I pretty much flunked out the first year. My pride of being able to ask for help. So all the folks on the call listening that are listening to the podcast, don't be too prideful. Get out your own way and be
right.
There are resources available to you that can help you bridge the gap of what you didn't learn and what you need to know to be successful in college. And they're available for you a lot of times free of charge. You just got to lean in and be able to ask the right questions. And for some of us, that's extremely challenging to do, but it's necessary if you want to be successful. The other thing that I would say is a real thing is in college early on, I ended up my now wife and I went to high school together, and we also ended up going to Austin Peay together. But when I transferred to Austin Peay, she ended up getting pregnant. and we had twins. So right in the middle of my sophomore year, going into my junior year, I was a father early on. And there's certain resources that are also available for younger parents, collegiate parents too, as well. And I would say for encouraging purposes, being a parent is extremely hard. I was working 2 jobs. I work in the morning, work at night, in the middle of the day. But there are classes and there are schedules designed to be able to support folks who have families. There's even housing on campuses that's designed to be able to support people who have families. A lot of times universities have daycares, and you can have that daycare cost charge your student balance to be able to help with childcare. So there are things available, despite the challenges that you may rub up against, that can reuse as resources that, it may not shorten your time in the university. You may have to pivot a little bit, but ultimately it's still designed to be able to provide it as a resource for you so you can stay the course, persistent, ultimately get your post-secondary credential or degree.
Man, you just said so much there. And I know Dr. George is going to help so many students. So many times in the textbook, we don't talk about the stones in the road, right? We talk about all the sunshine, it's going to be great every day. But one thing I like to do during this podcast, again, number one is to show folks that if we did it, anybody can do it, right? And that we didn't get there just by chance. Like there were so many things that happened on the road. It's still happening, right? But I think that, successful people, you fall one day and you be like, hey, I'm hurt a little bit, but I'm going to get up. I'm going to keep on going. So I really appreciate you sharing it, especially with you having your twins in college, because that's a real thing that happens to a lot of people. And last but not least, even you were saying ask for help. I don't know if you read the book, Dr. George, but it seemed like you did. Then one of the chapters, we're going to say you did one of the chapters is asking for help. It sounds so simple, right? But if people don't really know you're struggling, or there might be something that's going on, if you don't just say verbally, I need some help. So I really appreciate you sharing that. Can you believe we're at the last question, Dr. George, at the value of college, right? 23, class of 24, and parents, to be honest, a lot of them are questioning the value of college. Like, hey, I'm sending my daughter, my son, I want to go to college. College, as we know, is an investment. It's expensive, right? Or, hey, I could just go work at Amazon. Amazon came to my school one day. They told me they'll pay me $30 an hour if I do overtime. Why waste my time to go to college? Can you talk about the value of college for our young people?
Absolutely. I go back to even said it with my twins. My twins are now in middle college. They're in a program where they're actually juniors in high school, but they're working towards an associate's degree, that when they graduate, they have an associate's degree and a leg up. So they're actually attending class at Austin Peay State University right now in real time. But the value of college for them, and for many people that I tell them, is associated with ultimately, what do you want to do? And that's a question that I think people have to answer, because I don't oftentimes think, and it's a huge opportunity in the education space, in the K-12 space, of how we position what we're doing and how we're serving students in a way where it really opens and unlocks the imaginative nature of what do I want to do with my life. A lot of times people get the idea of what they want to do because, again, they have exposure early on. My son wants to be a doctor, the other one wants to be a lawyer, but I have colleagues and fraternity brothers who are medical doctors and are lawyers. They come around them, and so they see that, and that allows me to inform what type of post-secondary opportunity they should seek, which we know they have to go and have at least a bachelor's degree to get into these graduate schools on the back end to get into the profession that they want to do. So first and foremost, the unlocking of what do you want to do oftentimes determine the post-secondary route. But I'll be honest with you, a lot of the jobs that we're seeing, they're requiring folks to have back degrees. So bachelor's degrees. Now, I will also say this too. I think that folks should be, a lot of times I say you should have some type of post-secondary credential.
Yes.
So, and when we say college, I don't want to just limit it to the community college or the 4-year institution. We also got to think about the technical college too, as well, because there are skill-based programs there that allow you to be employable. I think that that's where we have to start, that people have to see the value in that. The reality is everybody who's graduating in 23, 24 and beyond, they're going to have to work. They're going to have to make a wage. If you're working in a profession, you need to be aware of how that profession is trending. Right. There's a lot of artificial intelligence that's coming in, that's taking jobs away from folks who lack the skills to be able to obtain them. And also many jobs are pivoting and they're saying, hey, what you didn't need to have a post-secondary credential for or a degree, you now have to have it. I would highly encourage folks in the 23, 24 and beyond classes to really do the necessary research of the careers that they want to have, or even where they broadly may want to play in. I want to go into healthcare, but I may not know what I want to do. Look at the different professions and see what the requirements are in order for you to be able to work in that profession. I almost guarantee that many of those jobs are going to require some type of collegiate experience, whether it's at the technical college, the associate's college, community college, or the four-year institution or beyond. But if you're not associating what's the necessary post-secondary credential with what you want to do, you got to start doing that.
So true.
And I also say this last thing, whether you do it in the collegiate space or not, everybody's moving to some type of education-based requirement in order for you to get the credential. So if you say, hey, I'm not going to go to college at all, I want to go be a realtor, you're going to have to go to some type of
so true. Yeah.
to get your real estate license. I want to go be a data analyst. You're going to have to go do the Google course, the IB, somebody's course to show proficiency that you can be the analyst. The education component isn't removed. It's just more likely now everybody is navigating towards you having some form of college education that's associated with some type of post-secondary credential or degree to even get the job.
So true. So true. Dr. George, you just dropped some gems, and I love how you said, a lot of times, and I think this is just sometimes a cultural thing when we say post-secondary, people just automatically assume a 4-year, number one, and then fall back sometimes the community college, right? And so weekly, I'm breaking down every Monday, if you're subscribing to my YouTube, I'm breaking down the difference, right? So really, sometimes we take it by chance that folks just know what each type of institution offers. And I like how you said, the key thing is to just get some type of post-secondary credential that aligns, right, with the end in mind. So again, I like how you said, hey, where do you see yourself? Where do you want to end up at? And then connect the dots. It's a line, right, that leads you right to the end result.
Can I add one more thing?
Yeah.
We're in the interest of time.
Yeah,
I know a lot of people have a lot of passions for what they want to do, and beyond passion, not to be passion like purpose. Passion is what you want, and purpose is what you're called to do, and sometimes those two can get murky. But the thing that I really want to do the most, I think sometimes we allow those things like having a child and not doing well in school, like different things in life that prevent us from continuing the pursuit of that. 23, 24 and beyond, please listen to me. If minimally, this doesn't have to be the end job for you, but please get you some type of skill-based credential that allows you to work and make a living wage. We're in an inflationary economy, and you need a living wage to really be able to make it. Now, with that credential, it may not be what you want to. It's not what you see yourself doing. Maybe I want to be a health, but I can go to TECA and get a credential that allows me to do manufacturing or to do HVAC, plumbing, or something. But you need to have some type of credential that at least allows you to make the money to be able to keep navigating towards the dream job that you desire. You're going to have to be able to be in a position to make money. There's nothing like having the credential. And regardless of whether it's the dream job now or it's the current job that you're leveraging through the credential to be able to be sustained in this economy.
Man, with that being said, Dr. George, again, you dropped some great gems on today. Of course, I want to thank the students, the parents, as I mentioned earlier. Please make sure that you're sharing these interviews with students, schools, all in the community. I have some really great folks on here like Dr. George today, and they're coming weekly. So again, there's no excuse to say you didn't know. If you follow my channel, it's free. YouTube, go subscribe, like, and of course, share. And again, I will see you the same time next Wednesday as we drop our next interview. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.